Hello everyone. Tonight, I'll be narrating 2 new creepy stories that I found off of the Creepy Encounters subreddit. After you've heard these stories, let me know what you think of them in the comments below. You be the judge. But without further ado, let's dive straight into their experiences.
These are their stories.
This took place when I was 19, now 28. I was in college and working as a bartender at a little country bar further out from the city. This place was also supposed to be a 21 plus only because there were gambling machines right along the bar, but the rule was if anyone asked, you just turned 21. For the most part, I loved the job and loved the money. After a few weeks, I came in at 8 p.m. to start my shift, and it was already a pretty good crowd to be a weeknight. I make my rounds to see an attractive guy and his beer is empty, so I ask if he needs another. He immediately sparks up a conversation with me. I found out he's 28, a paralegal, has a dog, etc. He finishes his new beer and leaves me a $20 bill as a tip, with a rose he made out of a bar napkin. This continued nightly for about a week, and we eventually exchanged phone numbers. I ended up letting him know that I wasn't 21, just in case things progressed, and he said he didn't mind, blah blah blah. He would come into the bar nightly, text me after he left, and the following days, until he came back into the bar that night. About 2 weeks go by, and I take a long weekend to go out of town, around 3 hours away. It was St. Patrick's Day weekend that year, so my friends and I went to a party of course. The guy, we'll call him Patrick, that's convenient, was continuing to text me, but I never let him know I was going anywhere. Things weren't serious to me. I never hung out with him outside of my work shifts, so what's there to tell? I then get a phone call from one of the girls at work telling me there's a guy there that will not stop asking me where I am and when I'm coming to work. Turns out, it's Patrick. Immediate red flag to me, but I didn't want them to deal with the drama, so I text him and let him know I'll be back on Sunday, leaving out that I would be back and going straight to work that evening because honestly, I didn't want him to know that I'd be at the bar. He continues to text me all weekend and I respond to keep the peace. I show up to work that Sunday to a new bouncer the owner hired. I can't tell you why, but I had this feeling, so I go ahead and spill about Patrick onto him just in case he showed up. A few hours pass and 2 guys come in and sit down. I stare at them for a minute and realize they're 2 guys that Patrick's been in there with before. I ask if they want anything and they just ask for water. Sure enough, after I notice one of them make a phone call, here comes Patrick in the door. I immediately shoot the bouncer a look and he catches my drift. Patrick sits down and I keep the convo short and get his beer. He just keeps watching every single move I make. They eventually get up and go to the pool table and the jukebox. Next thing I know, Brown-Eyed Girl's playing. I have brown eyes, of course. And Patrick is standing there smiling at me. The song is over and I tell the bouncer to watch the bar for me. I needed to step out back and smoke a cigarette before I had a panic attack. I left the back door open so I could watch the bar for any new customers. Next thing I know, The Kill by 30 Seconds to Mars is playing. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. The bouncer comes to the door and is asking me for details about the guy and the situation. Here comes Patrick storming towards us. So he's why you aren't interested anymore? Literally starts a scene, going on about how he is heartbroken and I can't believe I could do this to him. I'm just standing there smoking another cigarette, watching the crazy unfold on this guy. The bouncer finally gets him out, and after a few minutes I felt like I could breathe and go on about my night. It's 3 a.m, so we start to clean up and the bouncer goes to take the trash out. He comes in and locks the door and tells me Patrick is in his car in our parking lot, but not to worry because he'll walk me to my car, and not go straight home in case Patrick tries to unleash more crazy on me. So I leave, and sure enough in my rear view is the face of a stalker. I decide to go to Sheetz and get some breakfast/dinner. That's a well-lit, busy place at any time of the day, right? I go in and order my food, and here comes Patrick. I keep my back to him hoping he'll take a hint, but this guy comes right up to me and puts his arm around my shoulders. I step to the side and he just casually laughs and then grabs my hand. I honestly can't even remember what I said, but something along the lines that he's a psycho and he leaves. I pay for my food, no sign of him in the parking lot, and head to my apartment. I remember being extremely anxious because you had to park across the street, but I made sure to have my key ready and everything in my hands to make a run for it. I get inside, lock the door, eat my food, shower, and finally lay down. Then I hear it, the doorknob slightly jiggling. I was frozen in fear. I hear it again, this time louder. I went to get up to look out the peephole, but the floor was so old and squeaky, I took one step and was frozen again. This went on for minutes, and then it finally just stopped. It was going to be daylight soon, so I just laid there until I was safe. I get a text from Patrick the next day, apologizing for the night before, asking to get lunch, and says he wants me to meet his mother. I tell him to stop contacting me. I found him on Facebook and went ahead and blocked him so he couldn't use that as a way to communicate. The text continued daily for months with no response from me, and I remember one day I didn't get a text and thought, oh, it's finally over. I received one text a year until I got a new number around 5 years ago and it would always say, thinking of you. Luckily I moved away and never ran into him again. I just can't help but think what would have happened if I wouldn't have gotten serious or went on a date with that guy. I had a stalker in junior high and high school. This was back in the early 2000s, without being too specific. As far as I know, this guy's still out there somewhere. We met each other through an extracurricular activity group, and he struck me as a shy and quiet guy. I was rather shy myself. For the time being, we had only seen each other at these extracurricular get-togethers maybe once or twice a month. I don't remember when it happened or how, but we exchanged phone numbers and he asked me to go to a dance with him at his high school since he was maybe 2 years older than me. Surprisingly, my mom agreed and I was genuinely excited. The day rolled around and we arrived at the town where the boy lived. The dance happened and we danced together pretty much exclusively from what I remember, and maybe only once did we dance very close together. Maybe a couple months down the road, I had the opportunity to invite him to see a movie with my sisters and I, which we accepted and my parents agreed would be fine. All that happened at that time was we exchanged a few pleasantries before and after, but beside that we only watched the movie, and I wouldn't really have considered that to be a date. After some time, the boy started calling me almost every week, which was fun and nice at first, but he was exceedingly awkward despite how long we'd been communicating, and continued to be just as awkward to talk to no matter how many times he spoke. His voice was always very low and soft, and he spoke almost exclusively in short sentences, letting me do most of the talking. Honestly, there wasn't much going on in my life, so we ran out of things to talk about pretty quickly, but he often kept me on the phone for about an hour each time. It came to be that after a time I would get sick of talking to him. He didn't really contribute to the conversations, and I didn't have an interesting enough life to carry it on by myself. In addition to the phone calls, the guy also had my home address and email too. He would send mostly funny chain letter type emails, and occasionally would write me a letter. The frequency of those was never enough to bother me, but the phone calls were really wearing me down. Later on, we moved to a different state during the summer, and the guy weaseled my new phone number and address out of me. I was kind of hoping that he'd have lost interest at this point, but that was not the case. One afternoon, out of the blue, our doorbell rang and I answered it. Being the closest one to the door, to my surprise, the guy was there at the door along with a super tall male friend of his whom I didn't know or recognize. I greeted the guys with a smile and asked them what they were doing there. I didn't think it was weird at first, but the longer this interaction went on, the stranger it became. For one thing, neither one said a word, and they both came towards me like they were going to push past me to the house, but once they noticed my parents were there, they kinda stopped and looked at each other as if they didn't know what to do now. Me, not getting the gravity of the situation, invited them in and showed them the comic book I had been working on since the beginning of that summer. If the guy spoke at all, it was only very briefly, and his friend said nothing, nor was he introduced to me. Despite having driven supposedly from his hometown, which would have been more than 100 miles away mind you, they only stayed for maybe 5 minutes and then they both left. Only later did I fit the pieces together and realize that the picture it made was very dark and sinister. I decided after we moved to a different house that I wouldn't give him my forwarding address any longer, but he still had our home phone number, since that hadn't really changed. Maybe a year or two after the surprise visit, I was home from school at our new house when the phone rang. I answered it, thinking it could be one of my friends from school, but it was the guy. I sighed, being unwilling to just tell him I didn't want to talk, and sat on the stairs with my chin in my hand, wishing my mom would come home so she could get me off the phone. After a while, the guy asked me what was wrong because I wasn't talking that much, and I kept yawning or sighing, so I said, "I'm just tired." "Well, you don't look tired." My eyes darted to all windows I could see from where I sat on the stairs. Could he see me? Where was he right now? How did he find our new house when I hadn't told him the address and we weren't listed in the phone book? I suddenly blurted out, "I have to go," hung up the phone, ran up the stairs, locked myself in the bathroom and called my mom. I was terrified that the next thing I would hear was glass breaking and him coming to find me in the house. Mom told me not to move and she would be home in a few minutes. I should have called the cops honestly. The next time he called, only a few days later, and he acted like he hadn't been a creep at all just one phone call ago, I told him flat out that if he ever called me again, I would call the police. I am still afraid of this guy. I don't know how he found me and I'm a little afraid he could find me again. Hopefully, I don't have to meet him again. Alright, so that's it. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you did, consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. But as always,
Have a nice day.